When I first started editing this video, I wanted to put a lot of cool sound and visual effects, kind of like this one. Meet NOC 631630. I realized I am not a salesman, I'm an engineer. So let's talk about engineering, quality of manufacturing, and absolutely amazing little details, including an Easter egg they integrated into this knife. I was impressed before I even held the knife in my hand because it came with this titanium tool. It includes titanium driver bit for their slotted proprietary hardware. They did not include a T6 Torx bit required for full disassembly of this extremely complex knife. Disassembly, they thought. Who in the world would dare? Other than maybe a crazy YouTuber that I happen to be. And I absolutely had to know what all these curves, outrageous visual details, hidden connections and interfaces, what do they accomplish? And do they actually get you something other than the aesthetic appeasement? But first things first, and let's see how it all functions and maybe answer a question, why is it a collaboration with Lamborghini? Here's the real Lamborghini launch sequence. Flip the cover, press the button. Basically the same deal on the knife. The launch sequence of this knife is clearly not designed for practical or tactical use, because this quote-unquote start button cover completely locks out the blade, whether the blade is in open or closed position. Otherwise, it's a plunger lock with a stylized Lambo logo on a push button. Which brings me to the engineering wonder number one. Notice the orientation of the button lock mechanism. Abracadabra and voila! Yes, fully ambidextrous plunger lock that can be swapped from left to right. Of course I took it apart and tried that out. And I have to say, it works in any orientation. The Lambo flip-up cover doubles as a safety lock, while the semi-hidden Emerson Wave flip-up feature strongly resembles modern Lambo dashboard switches. The funny part is these two features cancel each other out, because if you wanted to use the Wave deployment out of the pocket, you would have to keep the safety switch in the open position in your pocket. And if you did this, you would injure yourself before the adrenaline kicks in. So even if you remembered to deploy the Wave feature and then release the safety before pocketing the knife, you would still have to close the safety before engaging this knife in any action. Is it a design mistake? What do you think? An ergonomic faux pas is the shape of the handle. These horns on the back, they're painful when you're inserting the knife in your pocket, because these pocket clips are pretty snug. Dual pocket clips, I kid you not. Just as the word ambidexterity is not in common use, nor is this design solution. Clearly, they weren't shooting for the everyday pocket banger, more for a supercar styling symmetricity. So I killed the factory warranty by taking it apart solely to test the blade hardness. And then during the reassembly, I discovered by accident that you can flip the push button mechanism around and it will still work. You'll see soon enough, but first, as always, I'll take a first look under the microscope to determine whether or not the blade was sharpened as it should have been at this price level. And for that I use my very inexpensive Amazon microscope, which is a handheld and plugs into any handheld device via USB-C port. Link, of course, is in the description, and I highly recommend it as an essential sharpening tool so that you can see what you're doing as you sharpen your prized possession. There is the tip. What jumps at me immediately is they stropped it quite a bit, as we can deduce from the rounding off at the tip and pretty good convexity at the edge itself. So let's look at the apex. What is surprising, the apex is almost an invisible line, meaning they did not overstrop it. They stropped it a lot without overstropping it, therefore strengthening the edge and removing all the burr. The question is, will it still have a good bite without toothiness at the edge? I do two tests to determine blade's bite capability. First is this unsupported paper towel test, where a sharp blade would bite without sliding off or ripping the paper towel on the first try. And this blade is almost there. Almost, but not quite. Let me show you a blade I recently touched up on this G&G Hawk Talon, which is my favorite daily banger. As you can see, it bites right in and then continues the cut cleanly without ripping the paper. Try to do it with your sharpest knife and let us know in the comments how it went. I guess just like the real Lambo, this knife requires shakedown, break-in, and fine-tuning. The second sharpness test I normally do is cutting into the paper towel tube, which again is unsupported. And this knife, or this blade, as I remove the handle, it's not starting very well, but eventually, with the right angle of attack, I am able to take a bite into the cardboard, and there it cuts. Pretty thick behind the edge, so we'll measure that in a minute. For now, let's grab that piece and demonstrate again with the recently honed Hawk Talon. That's how it's supposed to look when properly sharpened. Let's start by measuring the stock thickness on the blade. It came out in millimeters, so I'm going to measure in millimeters first. I got 3.8 millimeters, and now I am going to measure behind the edge thickness, which is a little tricky. And don't worry, you see the numbers on the jaws of my calipers. This is their hardness. I measured it, and it should be at least 8 points below that of M390. And so it will not scratch the edge. Let's see what I'm getting here is 1/3 of a millimeter. You know how I'm so used to inches? I don't know if I'm supposed to say ooh or ooh. I mean, I have no idea. All right, let's convert it to American inches here. So we got what, 13 to 16 thousandths of an inch? Should have said ooh, sounds smarter. And let's measure the stock thickness. We got 150 thousandths of an inch thick. Here it is next to PM2 and the Manix 2 XL. Here's the Psyop and the Raccoon Slim. And also Shiro Quantum Ursus and Remet Rhino. And just for shiggles, Microtech MSI and Stitch. Overall length just over 9 inches or 232 millimeters. The blade length is just under 4 inches, 100 millimeters. And the cutting edge is 3 and, what is it, 15/16 or 94 millimeters. It weighs 156, 157 grams or 5.5 ounces, which is actually very light for the size of this knife. Before every hardness test on my channel, I verify the calibration of my Rockwell tester using this independently certified, serialized, and rated 62 HRC calibration block. I do it out of abundance of caution and to deliver as accurate a result to you as I can. Keep in mind, though, this is not an industry standard test because for a batch of blades, at least 5 should have been measured. What I'm trying to say here is yours could be softer or harder than mine. From this point forward, this segment is accelerated 2x, but it is continuous, uninterrupted, and unedited so that you know there's no shenanigans behind the scene or creative editing. My calibration comes in at 61.9, which is near perfect, or as perfect as it can possibly be. So I am pressing on with testing the blade on this One 630 knife. As you can see, I'm placing it on the anvil. Anvil is then risen toward the stationary diamond-tipped probe. The 0 is set. Then I release the major load of 150 kilos, and the depth of indentation is measured and then converted to points of Rockwell. 61.2 on the first poke. So this is M390. For M390 to be over 61 HRC is good. Is it the best? No. It is possible to push this steel above 62 HRC, but that would require additional thermal cycles, 61.4 HRC. So these additional thermal cycles would require deep cryogenic treatment. And that is quite an expensive process. It requires additional equipment, some logistics planning, and a lot of manufacturers are not willing to go this extra mile because at over 61, M390 shows excellent performance. 61.5 on the third poke, 61.4 is our average. And so the verdict for the day is this blade is heat treated very well. If you find this information interesting, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. While I don't think a lot of people will be disassembling this knife for maintenance, I think taking a look inside will be of a lot of interest to all of you guys who are watching thus far, because, as I mentioned earlier, this knife has an Easter egg in its design. And by Easter egg, I mean hidden feature, namely the ability to switch plunger lock from left to right. I am using the titanium tool that is provided with the knife, as well as a T6 in my Hoto multi-bit driver. I picked Hoto because the bits are made out of S2 steel and they're heat treated 60 to 62 HRC, which I measured myself. On a vast majority of knives that I disassemble, if I can remove the blade without taking the handle apart, it is possible to reinstall the blade the same way. But I learned the hard way that on this knife it is not possible. So tight are the tolerances that you will never be able to reinstall the bearings while the handle is still assembled. Disassembly continues with removal of 2 slotted and 6 T6 screws from the handle, which will then come apart in 3 large pieces, which is a must-do, especially if you are swapping the direction of the plunger button. So here's a close-up of the push button mechanism, and as you can see, currently it's in a left-handed orientation with the button itself on the right. And to remove it, I had to pull the frame apart, which is not easy because of how snugly all the pieces are fitted. In this design, what people would call a backspacer, it's not actually that. It's more of a receiver, like on a firearm, because it brings all the pieces together, and without it, they would just simply not function. Like, for example, the safety switch, which is attached with 2 screws to this quote-unquote receiver. Because I'm switching the plunger orientation back to right-handed, I reattach the receiver to the right side of the frame. I use ram oil underneath the washers. This way they stay with the frame without falling out. Now let's take a quick look at the plunger assembly. Right here, it has a housing for the plunger that matches the handle cutouts, as well as the plunger itself that also houses the spring. The spring also has some grease on it to stay with the plunger as I manipulate it. This is how it all fits, and we will see a lot more detail a little bit later. So I drop the plunger assembly into the handle, or I should say from the left side of the frame, because it's not a handle yet. Before reinserting the pivot stem, we need to put the titanium collar back on it. The plunger can fit into its housing both ways, so you need to make sure you orient the flat alignment feature toward where the blade tank will interface with it. And now I'm dropping the bearing back on the pivot stem, and notice how I'm holding the button. It's depressed, and at the same time applying pressure sideways to the stem so that I can do this operation. What I'm doing is simultaneously fitting the tang of the blade into the slotted cutout on the plunger housing while putting it on the pivot stem. And once it's assembled thusly, if you rotate the blade out of battery, it will hold the entire assembly together. Nothing will fall out. So now I can put the second bearing on, and now it's time to bring in the receiver with the right side of the handle already attached to it. What's amazing, there are no alignment pins in this entire knife. Everything fits together due to extremely precise machining, and that includes the carbon fiber overlays, which are not purely decorative as they control interface between various modules of this knife. The push button is now in right-handed orientation, where you can depress it with your thumb. And please notice, not a single screw has been reinstalled, not even the pivot screw. And yet the knife is functional and it stays in one piece. I can totally set it down and do whatever I need with it. It will not come apart, all thanks to this absolutely insane quality of their machining. The pivot stem is so snugly fitted to the blade and the frame halves that there's absolutely no rocking, even though I didn't really torque the pivot screw. And all the other features are functional. I was especially concerned with the safety switch or starter button cover interface, but no issues. Love the styling or hate it, whatever, you cannot say this is not an amazing piece of engineering. Please share what you think about this knife in the comments, and here's some of my thoughts. Is it practical? Absolutely not. Is it cool? Yes. Is it absolutely insanely expensive? For sure. Will it get you the same amount of attention as driving a Lamborghini? Heck no. Nobody will notice what's in your pocket until you shove it right in their face, and then they'll just hate you. Especially if you tell them how much you paid for the darn thing. But if you are a collector tired of never-ending re-releases of the same models from the major manufacturers that are prevalent today, that's a piece for you, I think. Just as it is for me. And notice, like I said earlier, I was able to fully operate this knife before I even reassembled all the screws back onto it. Really, the screws are there just for a backup. The knife stays together like a dovetailed puzzle. At this point, I am grateful Blade City was able to import 60 or so of these pieces, and I think some of them are much more expensive because they're mid and full dresser, competing with some of the most expensive Marfion customs in price. And the interesting phenomenon that I think I should share with you, if they tried to make a budget version of this knife, they would end up with a gas station piece of junk. I honestly believe that. The whole point of this knife is the amazing achievement in the area of engineering and machining. Making it mass-produced with cheaper methodologies and materials would just make it feel like any other plunger lock knife out there.